friends, and welcome back to Ghouls Night In, the spooky chat show with your best ghoul friends. I'm Penny Snark.
And I'm Midge Munster. And Penny, it has been a little bit since I have brought something in the flavor of witches floating around in eggshells to the pond.
Ooh, the
Yeah,
best flavor.
the best flavor there is. And I recently learned some fun factoids from my friend Anne about a very interesting practice in Finnish folklore and was immediately fascinated by it. Knew I wanted to bring this tidbit to the pod. So today I want to dabble in a little bit of folk magic and talk
Ooh,
about frog burials.
okay.
Do you have any back knowledge on this
I
weird
do
little?
not.
I didn't either, and I was just giddy when Anne told me about that. I thought it was fascinating. So, shout out to her for always bringing me weird stuff to talk about. So, in the late 19th century, there was restoration happening on two Eastern Finnish churches. And during that time, they found a multitude of miniature coffins containing the remains of frogs under the floorboards of said churches.
Super normal.
Super casual thing to find. And when I say multitudes, I mean like 20 to 30 coffins.
That's a lot of tiny coffins.
Yeah, it wasn't like, oh, we found two frog, which is still an insane number. Two would have been
It's still an
plenty.
unexpected number, but
Still not what you think you're going to find. So, one of the earliest known findings of this was reported by, and I'm just going to say out front here, there's a lot of language in this episode, and I will do my best to pronounce things to the best of my abilities. But the earliest known finding was reported by a newspaper called Savo Karjala in 1895.
oh wow.
Right. And the paper reported that 26 wooden miniature coffins had been found during the renovation work under the choir floor of the Kuopio Cathedral. And they believed that the coffins had been pushed into the space through ventilation hatches using like a long pole to push them
Hmm.
under the floor. So, at the time that they found and uncovered the coffins, some of them were still relatively new based on the state of the frog remains. uh, so then, 1901, they find five more coffins. And the paper, once again, reported it, guessing that by the number of increase in the coffins, that they were still being added and being added yearly because it had been about 5 years and there were five additional coffins.
Mm.
Um, so they were confused, obviously.
Sure.
They're
Fair.
like, and there was a bit of a media frenzy around it, and then it kind of died away. Two of the coffins, though, were kept by the National Museum of Finland in Helsinki, and another by the Kuopio Museum. And the museums took the time and effort to further inspect them. So each coffin was found to be carved from alder wood, which, if you are a witchy person at all, alderwood is very prevalent in magic and is said to kind of be
Ooh.
a gateway to the other world. It's used in a lot of like things dealing with resurrection. So that's very interesting. There was also, I mean, almost always a frog inside the coffin. The ones that they dissected in particular also had fishing net covering the frog with
Ooh.
a needle that was stuck through the frog with a white thread in the needle. And in one case, the frog had also, the mouth of the frog had been stitched closed.
That's
So,
spooky.
yeah, definitely immediate signs of like something ritualistic happening
Mhm.
there. Then moving forward, there were similar things found in 1907 at a church. This is the one I'm like, I'm not going to get this in to Sinimi.
Mm. Of course.
Somebody from Finland, come in and roast me, please. I know we have listeners in Northern Europe. Somebody come get your midge and correct her. Um, Yeah, two Sanimi. But similar coffins had been found in that church in 1818 in the bell tower specifically. But then in 1907, they found again in the floorboards of the church. These coffins also contained bed bugs, animal hair,
Mm.
and grains that had been placed inside. And they were discovering these even up to the point of the 1930s. And at that point, they were even finding them under the church's stone foundation at this same location.
Damn.
Yes. So this is where it gets wild, Penny.
Oh, now it gets
Get
wild.
this at this point. So at this particular location, all in all, they found upwards of 100 miniature coffins.
Jesus.
Uh, what?
What? And so just from over
Yeah.
years and years
Yeah,
for a
just
hundred
collect.
years.
It was my understanding is the practice had been kind of just secret up to that point, so it had
Yeah.
been a large collection.
Well, I mean, you
Um,
start running out of secret places to put your frog coffins. People are gonna start finding them, being like, "I
right,
gotta look for more of these."
exactly. Well, yeah, and yeah, once one's uncovered, then the frogs are
You
out
got
of
a whole
the
frog
bag.
problem now.
You got a whole can of frogs. Uh, so you can't forget about it, you might say.
Yeah.
Oh, so this has been Dad Jokes with Midge.
I say this is a strong dad joke recording day.
Yeah, yeah. Other places that they found these coffins include, oh my goodness, Kiet Silvara Church, where they found 4 miniature coffins.
That's
Um,
much more reasonable.
yes,
No, I'm like,
found
you don't even have a frog coffin problem if you only got
you
4.
4. Wow, you really think you can get in on the frog coffin game? But in this one, there was an interesting adage where there were cat remains found in some, as well as
Ew.
squirrels, and some even had alderwood puppets that had not
Mm.
like a puppet, not a.
Yeah.
It was listed as a puppet in the findings, but I'm assuming it's like a little wood carving of a
Yeah.
person. Uh, then in Pilavesi Church, which also had alder puppets, bound frogs, and birch bark puppets. Nilesa, Nilesia had more frogs with fishing net as well as textiles. Heinvezi had 3 miniature coffins with frogs with fishing nets. And then lastly, Turku Cathedral had several different textiles as well as bats.
Bats.
Yay!
Hey.
Miniature coffins with bats.
That's pretty cool. Are these places like all over Finland or was it in like a specific region? Do you
It's
know?
pretty well consolidated to one region.
All right.
If you can actually find
I
the
would say that's probably a spoiler for
no, 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 but you can find the map of the church's locations, and most of them are kind of grouped in this one distinct chunk of Finland. And then there is one, I believe, that was in South Sweden. That's
Okay.
kind of a one-off, interesting place where they had not been found that southern previously. So definitely, we can assume possibly that this is very regionally specific. However, we'll get into a little bit more of that here in a minute.
Mhm.
So, what is the purpose of the tiny frog
What
burials?
is but why?
But who is phone? And all of the variations on this, like we said, they're finding the frogs with or different animals with multitudes of different things inside, but they're all variations on a folk ritual that had different intended purposes. But the majority of the recorded lore about this is about counter magic.
Mhm.
So, basically, with the intention to reflect evil intentions back at somebody who is sending you malintent.
Yeah. It's
Uh,
I
it's a
am rubber,
deflection.
you are glue of
Yes,
magic.
exactly. Um, so the frog, in most cases, is said to represent a bad witch
Mhm.
who is then buried in the custom built coffin and hidden specifically in a Christian church or churchyard. And it may seem strange, that a folk magic ritual would require a Christian burial, because that was also my first
Yeah.
question. I was like, why are these in Christian churches? But I guess this was believed to be the way to like invoke the amount of otherworldly power needed to make the
Oh.
ritual impactful. So as a whole, we're finding them in churches. There were a smaller number of recorded versions of this ritual that were done with what we can assume was the intent to inflict harm on other people. It's similar to the counter magic one, but the burial might include an item from a person that you were trying to inflict harm upon. In those rituals, you it was about 70% frogs. But we're, but we're also looking at, again, squirrels, bats, and fish, specifically pike,
Mm.
used in those.
So for all of these like other animals, they all get
Mhm.
like their own like custom coffin that's their
Yeah.
size, right? Okay.
Tiny coffins. I couldn't find anything specifically about like the cats and squirrels, so I don't know if they were like remains.
Yeah, that's good.
Um,
I was kind of like I was like cat's not gonna fit in a frog
right.
coffin. Was
Right.
not a whole
Well,
cat. So I wasn't
right.
sure if it had its own because I mean presumably I mean I don't know presumably you're making coffins to order for this
Oh, you sure
ritual.
are. You
So
sure
you would
are.
just make
And we're
a
gonna
sweet cat sized one.
we're gonna go through the whole order of how you do this.
Heck yes.
Uh, but some believe that this particular thing was about spoiling your neighbor's fields. So specifically, when you're inflicting harm, there were times where grains were found in the mouth of the frog. So you would
Mm.
take grain from your competitor's field and put it in the frog's mouth, and then I'm presuming these are the situations where the frog's mouth was sewn shut, to
Mhm.
keep it in there. I found varying degrees of like frog buried alive versus frog has
Dead
been
frog,
maimed in
yeah.
some way. Um, but it kind of seems like some of these things were being buried alive, which is pretty dark. Um, but who am I to say? I don't. I've never had my crops damaged, so
It's true.
I don't know what I would do if someone was coming after my crops in 1895. But yeah, this was considered to be very powerful magic that could do many things, from kill like an intended victim, to there are recorded things of this being used for people with epilepsy,
Mm.
because epilepsy was kind of viewed as someone sending bad energy to somebody and
Yeah.
causing them to have a fit.
Mhm.
So they would include a piece of the afflicted person's undergarments in the frog coffin, and that was supposed to help
Where'd you get
cure the
those?
well, from the person. They were
Oh, right, okay. That's I thought okay, sorry. My brain was, like, from the person who was sending the bad magic, and I was like,
penny raid.
that's a whole heist, like, you have this person who hates you, and now you have to steal their underwear for your frog magic? Okay, yes, from the person who is sick, that's fair,
The
you probably have
afflicted.
easy access to
Yes.
those.
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, in assuming they are probably also partaking in the ritual to get rid of their affliction.
Yes.
Not a frog coffin panty raid.
Now that's an episode
Oh,
title.
there it is. Ding ding. Uh, so here we have one written example from the mid 1800s that actually lays out the parameters of this ritual. So it states that here's where your question comes in, Penny.
Hmm,
That before the coffin is built, the frog must be found and
yeah,
caught with mittens or something covering the hands. So you can't touch the frog with your bare
don't touch
hands.
the frog.
If the coffin is made before the frog has been caught, what will happen is no frog will be found at all.
Oh, don't
So
count your chickens before they hatch.
don't count
Don't
your frogs
don't
before they're
count
mittened.
don't build
Yeah.
your coffins before you got a frog.
Yeah, so you're not supposed to build the coffin. So yes, it is literally being custom built for the
Good.
frog in question. Um, It is also stated in this that the frog should specifically be of a reddish color, and I found that in several iterations of this research that apparently the red frog was the thing.
Hmm,
I don't know what that has to do with it, but good on you.
there you go.
So yes, the coffin then, once you get your frog, coffin's supposed to be made of a single growing alder. It should be trough shaped, and the lid should have 9 holes along the mid ridge and should be made from the same tree, and also 8 wooden nails made from the same wood. Um, the red frog, which has not been touched with bare hands,
No.
is then put on its back in the coffin with its hind legs bound in red thread. Then the lid is put on, and see, this is where I'm like, is the frog alive? Because I'm
Yeah.
assuming they're binding it so it doesn't move. Um, but then you put the lid on, put the 8 nails in the coffin, and then one coffin nail, like one. It says one coffin nail, so I'm assuming that's a metal nail
Mhm.
that is driven into the third hole, counted from the head, which coincides with the heart of the frog.
Mm.
Uh, so there you have a frog coffin.
There you go.
In this particular usage, the writer was using this to counteract a the cows would not come back to pasture. Like they
Okay.
weren't coming home at night, so it was like counter magic for what he believed was somebody keeping his cows away from his pasture. So in this situation, he also pulled hair off of each cow and then put them in a rag, which was closed with red thread, and took the frog coffin, the cow hair pouch, and 3 sharp tools with unknown makers.
Mm.
You know how
All
you
right.
have those, and carried them, circling the cow shed twice clockwise and once counterclockwise, reciting a spell. And that's how you keep your cows at home.
There you go.
Seems like a lot of work for
It
cows, but
does.
so that's the gist of the building part of this. But it is widely believed that due to the large number of these coffins that were found specifically with bits of fishing net inside of them, that this ritual was most frequently performed by fishermen to steal the luck of the catch
Oh.
from a more successful fisherman, or to protect their boats and equipment from being sabotaged. Uh, so there are a wide we'll say it casts a wide net of the ways that people were using this ritual.
Yeah.
But what I think is really interesting in particular about this is that this is a time and a culture where, I just find folk magic fascinating because most people were practicing in everyday life. This wasn't like reserved for
Yeah.
witches or people who identified as witches. There's a woman named Dr. Sonia Hucantavio, who is I was like, pop off queen, the leading expert in frog coffin burial.
Hell yeah, she is.
But I read her journal, her like scientific
Her paper.
paper about this, which you can find online. You can just look it up, her like academic paper on this. It's very interesting, actually. Like it's substantial. It's about 25 pages of work, but it's really interesting, and she delves really deeply into all this. But um, she makes a point in that to say that like magic was used in all kinds of ways to ensure luck for farming, fishing, hunting, livelihood, uh, healing the sick, avoiding misfortune. So she says that everyone in the community was at least somewhat skilled in magic, and everyone knew that it was being practiced.
Mhm.
Um, which, like, I don't know. Where did it go?
No.
Where bring back magic in communities. But she also does make a point to say, however, there was a line in the sand. There was a belief that good fortune or luck was limited to each person. Thus, one could not increase one's own luck without taking it from another.
Ah.
So in the ways that this was practiced, it was like approved for you to protect your own share of luck against evil witches,
Mm-hmm.
but it was like a big no-no to try to steal someone else's luck.
Yeah, that's how you
So,
become an evil witch, is
right.
by
So
coveting others' luck.
these fishermen though that are there's a lot of all I'm saying is there's a lot of fishnets in frog coffins.
Mm-hmm.
So, what were y'all doing?
Y'all doing?
Seems like people were stealing luck. So while counter magic is definitely not specific to Finnish culture, we see a lot of similar types of things like this throughout history. Like, I mean, witch bottles come to mind
Mm-hmm.
specifically. Like, lots of those have popped up over the years, which is a similar situation. It's a deflecting evil magic thing. There were also small lead coffins found in Athens from around 400 BC that were a similar practice, but there were like four of those found where
Yeah.
so what's really interesting here is just the sheer amount of these that were found. And in her paper, Dr. Sonia hypothesizes that there must have been some type of event in this regional area that really affected the fishing around the
Yeah.
time, and that was the major source of livelihood. Hence the big surge of these all kind of from the same time period and being continuously added during that time between
Yeah.
1895 and 1901. But whatever the reason may be, I find these types of things fascinating. And like I said, I like to remember that at one point, magic or witchcraft or whatever you want to call it was like a major thread through a lot of cultures and societies, and a lot of these, you know, unwritten practices and rituals were just common passed down things. I think
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's very cool. I don't think it's cool to hurt live frogs. Don't do that.
Yes.
But it's very interesting, and it's something strange and weird that
Yeah.
I
Super
was very
cool.
excited to learn more about. So if you are a listener who happens to be from Finland or Sweden or any of the areas where some of these have been found, and you're familiar with this, especially because, like I said, some of these went to museums and were part of like roving, what am I trying to say? Exhibits. There we go.
Yeah.
So if you've had the opportunity to see one of these coffins in a museum, be sure to let us know. I always love to hear about your own personal knowledge or experience with the topics we chat about here.
Yes, always.
Yeah. If you would like to chat with us about that or see pictures of tiny frog coffins, you can follow us over on Instagram at Ghouls Night in Pod. And if you're enjoying our podcast and all the weird and wacky topics that we talk about, let us know. You can leave us a rating or a review wherever you listen. You can leave us reviews on Apple Podcasts. You can leave us a comment on Spotify if that's where you're listening. Or you can always send us a direct message on Instagram, and we may just read your review right here. I believe Penny has an Instagram submitted review to share with us today.
I sure do. This Instagram review comes from Gabs, and she says, I just wanted to say I absolutely love your show. My partner and I just bought our first house this year, and it is an Edwardian fixer-upper, but we absolutely love her.
Oh,
But
wow.
I know, the dream. But as we've done nothing but work on this house for the last 6 months, I've been listening to your podcast nonstop. I am obsessed with the Victorian era, so all your episodes about those crazy Victorians tend to be my favorite. But last week I was listening to your Clue episode, and when you mentioned Edgar Allan Poe, my cat Poe came running into the room chirping because he heard his name. So I wanted you to know that you have two very dedicated listeners in Canada. And Gabs did in fact send us a photo of Poe the cat running, who had run up to hear his name, and he was so cute.
Oh,
It
so
was just so
cute.
sweet. So thank you to Gabs and Poe for listening to the show.
I hope Poe is once again hearing his name and chirping.
Yes. I was
Oh,
like, as soon as when Midge finally does that Edgar Allan Poe episode, he is gonna be psyched.
I looked it up yesterday because I just finished Fall of the House of Usher, so I'm back on my
Mm.
bullshit. And Poe's birthday is January 19th. So I'm
All
like,
right.
okay, that gives me a time frame of I need to start writing my Poe episode to get it right.
Yes.
So come back in January for Poe.
It can also always be a two-poder.
Well,
Parter?
in other
Two-part?
news, this is now a
Eh,
single podcast and it's
eh.
only me, as Penny has been fired permanently.
I'm not allowed to make dad jokes. I see how it is.
You can, they just have to be good.
Oh. Wow. Feud Google's Night in Feud begins now.
Not clickbait. Oh, well, thank you so much for your review, Gabs. Thank you all for listening today. And if you'd like to keep up with us individually as we go through this separation, you can find me all over the web at Midge Munster.
And you can find me at Penny Snark.
And until next time,
Goodbye.
goodbye.